President Abbas will be introduced by Ambassador William Clark. Ambassador Clark is Executive Director of Churches for Middle East Peace, known as CMEP, a nonprofit coalition of 25 national churches that conducts education and advocacy in support of a just, durable, and comprehensive resolution of Israeli-Palestinian conflict. CMEP is the sponsor of tonight's event. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador William Clark.
We are honored tonight to hear from a man who has dedicated most of his life to support for nonviolence and negotiations to end the decades of violence between Palestinians and Israelis. Mahmoud Abbas was born in Safed in 1935, a town in northern Galilee that was home to some 12,000 Palestinians. In 1948, at the age of 13, he became a refugee and went to work to support his family. In the 1950s, he was a founder of an organization that became the Palestine Liberation Movement, Fatah. In the 1970s, he pioneered efforts to establish contacts with Israeli peace groups. He represented the Palestine Liberation Organization at the signing of the Oslo Agreement on the White House lawn with President Clinton in 1993, at which the PLO not only recognized Israel, but recognized in writing Israel's right to exist. In 2004, he became chair of the PLO, and in 2005, president of the State of Palestine. Mahmoud Abbas has been recognized by many as a partner for peace. He has said repeatedly that it is not through violence, but through negotiations that an end to the occupation and Palestinian national aspirations can be achieved. He opposes incitement. He has worked closely with the United States to assure that there is one gun and one law in the West Bank. Violent deaths in Israel from Palestinians have declined from hundreds per year to near zero. In the hope of progress towards ending the occupation, President Abbas led serious negotiations with Israel in 2008 under the Annapolis Agreement, and again during the 9 months ending last April under Secretary of State John Kerry, despite the recommendations of some of his advisors who were skeptical of negotiations led by the United States. He has met many times over past years with Secretary Kerry, who has said he deeply appreciates all President Abbas has done for peace. At a time of growing dangers in the Middle East, President Abbas is a man who deserves respect and support for those seeking to sincerely end conflict and bring about lasting reconciliation. President Abbas.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. President Barusha, Mr. Clark, distinguished faculty and guests, religious leaders, dear students and members of the Cooper Union community, thank you for this opportunity to speak at one of the world's most distinguished colleges. From Cooper Union, I would like to say thank you, America, for extraordinary efforts that you have made to create peace in Palestine, and in particular to President Barack Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry for their endless trips back and forth in search of peace. What President Obama and Secretary Kerry did took courage, just as it took courage for Abraham Lincoln to stand at this very podium to argue for the end of slavery. I am honored today to stand in front of you at this podium where 8 men who were or became American presidents have stood and announced their programs and platforms. This great hall has been instrumental in the furthering the abolitionist movement, the women's suffrage movement, American labor movement, the civil rights movement, and the Native American rights movement. These walls have heard men and women speak far more eloquent than me. I ask their accommodation for the next half hour to also hear me. I come here today to convey to you the greetings of my people in Palestine, who aspire for peace and justice. Palestine is a country in the heart of the Middle East, a country in the Middle East where Christians and Muslims live in harmony, a country in the Middle East, the birthplace of Jesus Christ, in Bethlehem, where I pray with my fellow Palestinian Christians 3 times every year, a country that hopes to live in peace and security side by side with its neighbor, the State of Israel. I come today to pledge to create the new peaceful state of Palestine. I come here to ask you to rethink Palestine. This may especially be seen by some as an odd and hard place for a faithful Muslim to talk peace. Here, almost in the shadow of Ground Zero, where thousands of innocent American men, women, and children were also victimized on a quiet September day. But today in Cooper Union, I stand on the same place where Abraham Lincoln stood over 150 years ago and condemned the scourge of slavery to state loud and clear that we, the Palestinian people, condemn terrorism. We condemn what happened in September 11. We condemn the treatment of Christians and non-Christians by ISIS, Daesh. I am speaking on behalf of 99% of the Muslim peoples around the world, here today nearly in the shadow of Ground Zero. I state to the world, the barbarians of ISIS, Daesh, and Al-Qaeda who killed innocent people are not faithful Muslims. And to the children and the families of the victims of September 11, I say as a Palestinian Muslim, I am sorry for your pain. These murderers do not represent Islam. We all stand against them to defeat their evil plans. At the same time, we must work to end the Israeli occupation and establish a Palestinian state, for we cannot for we cannot fight terror only by the gun. Recently in the Vatican, Pope Francis, Shimon Peres, the former president of Israel, and I prayed together for peace. We prayed together because though we come from 3 different religious traditions, we all pray, in fact, to the same God, to the same one God of Abraham. Our holy book, the Quran, says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, O mankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and female and made you into nations and tribes that you may know each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of Allah, the most virtuous of you. I am older than you, 79 years old, to be exact. My life has been largely lived, for better or worse. So today I come to tell you, young people, what I prayed for in the Vatican. I prayed for different words. I prayed that day for an end to the occupation of my country, Palestine. I prayed for a free and independent Palestine that will live side by side in peace, security, and prosperity with its neighbor, the State of Israel. As you may know, Jews, Christians, and Muslims have lived peacefully together in Palestine for centuries. So peace between religions runs through the heart of the most sacred city in the world, Jerusalem. Peace between the world's religions runs through Jericho, the oldest city on earth. Peace between the world's religions runs through Palestine. I prayed with the Pope that day for a Palestine and Israel that build bridges together instead of walls. I made a prayer that someday I will be able to enforce the United Nations Convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, which I have signed, and that we can make our new state of Palestine a model of women's rights in the Arab world. I also prayed that Israel will finally, after a long wait, live next to Palestine as a good neighbor and not as an occupier. So we Palestinians can continue to build our institutions for a modern and open state and society. I made a prayer for an America that is a real friend of Israel, not a false friend. And just as real friends do not let friends drive drunk. So, too, a real friend of Israel would not let them engage in the widespread killing of women and children, including bombing United Nations schools and hospitals, such as we saw in Gaza. Just as real friends in America don't let friends break the law. Real friend of Israel would not let them advance 15,000 new illegal housing units while at the same time claiming to engage in peace talks. Just as real friends in America don't let their friends abuse their neighbors' children, America, as a real friend of Israel, wouldn't let them routinely arrest, beat, and jail without charges Palestinian children, which has been well documented by both journalists and by independent human rights groups. And so today, I come to ask you, the students of Cooper Union, I come indeed to ask all of the students of America and the world, will you join this old man in his prayers? Will you help me to build a peaceful world? I am sure your answer is yes as well. Will you build this world I prayed for? And in fact, a better world than that, because as the Christian Arab philosopher Khalil Gibran since said, the future world of our children is so magical that an old man like me can never visit it, not even in my dreams. But I hope that I will see it. The people of Israel live today as our occupiers. And without a permanent vision of a peaceful coexistence with their very closest neighbors, not acceptable. My people in Gaza live under siege by Israel without freedom of travel or of trade, with 80% of them now reliant on foreign aid and in constant fear of being randomly bombed. They live locked in an open-air prison, not acceptable. To date, Israel maintains control of Gaza airspace, territorial waters, electromagnetic sphere, population registry, and the movement of all goods and people, the relatives of the very people in Gaza that Israel just killed even have to apply to Israel to obtain their death certificates. Is that a free people? Not acceptable. My people in the West Bank and East Jerusalem live under Israeli occupation, with segregated highways behind huge walls, traveling through constant internal checkpoints, a large number of them with no running water, a large number of them still in refugee camps for decades, with no right to a fair trial and no right to post bail, often physically beaten and abused upon arrest and with little hope for the future. Palestinians today have far fewer rights than African Americans in America had in the 1950s. None acceptable. I ask you to rethink Palestine. You are smart. Study us carefully. Find the truth contrary to what is so often portrayed in your media. In the last decade, we have done our part. We tried for many months to begin serious negotiations with Israel. We said to the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, since you openly state to the whole world that you support the two-state solution, why cannot we agree on a map for two states on the basis of 67 borders? Why, despite many, many requests, we had never gotten a map? I ask you to rethink Palestine. Help us stop the illegal stealing of our land. This week, I will propose to the United Nations a new timetable for peace talks. The key is to agree on a map, to delineate the borders of each country. I say today to Prime Minister Netanyahu, end the occupation, make peace. A quarter century has passed since the Palestine Liberation Organization officially endorsed the two-state solution. In a historic decision that has since been accepted by all the Arab states, Palestine recognized the State of Israel based on pre-67 borders, conceding over 78% of historic Palestine, rather than accepting 78% of the land in question. The current Israeli government has chosen to use the peace process as a smokescreen for more colonization and oppression. We still wish to believe that our Israeli neighbors do not expect the Palestinian people to live under a system of apartheid. The desire of peace and freedom-loving nation for independence cannot be eliminated by force. We are the only people on earth still live under occupation. Not acceptable. The fact is that the Arab League has presented a complete regional peace plan, the Arab Peace Initiative, in 2002, before 12 years. This plan, which still stands, offers Israel full recognition and normalization of relations by 57 member countries of the Arab League and the Islamic Conference. In exchange for what? For Israeli withdrawal to the 67 border and just an agreed solution between us and them to the refugee issue only. The refugee issue based on United Nations Security General Assembly Resolution 194. So our Nakba, which they deny, our Nakba can come to an end. Arab countries are the primary if anyone ever again tells you that the Arab countries are the primary barrier to peace, that is simply false. And it has been this way for over a decade. Rethink Palestine. Help us stop the illegal stealing of our land. Prime Minister Netanyahu, end the occupation, make peace. Only. We don't want anything else. End the occupation and make peace. We are ready for peace. The 8th commandment says, thou shalt not steal. America itself directly asked Israel to stop building illegal settlements on Palestinian land. But then Israel did the opposite. During the last 9 months of negotiations sponsored by the United States, after being asked to freeze settlements, Israel advanced housing units of 55,000 new settlers in occupied territories. 55,000 new settlers in the occupied territories, bringing to 600,000 the Israeli population in the West Bank. They have now in the West Bank 600,000 settlers illegally. And of course, in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Isn't stealing land covered by the 8th commandment? Under international law, Israel has no right to take that land. Israel's constant confiscation of our land is our most pressing and fundamental problem. It obstructs the achievements of a just and lasting peace with Palestine. This Israeli conduct reminds us of the wise words of late President Kennedy. What President Kennedy said. We cannot negotiate with those who say, what's mine is mine, and what's yours is negotiable. When Palestine exercised its long and overdue right to seek recognition of statehood before the United Nations 2012, it was not in an attempt to bypass a negotiating peace. Instead, it was to allow us to be a leader for peace and human rights in the Muslim world, mainly through access to multilateral treaties and international organizations. All the international organizations, we will be members of it. The worldwide vote to make us an observer state was in our favor by count of 138 to 9. 138 to 9 in our favor. Only 9 countries in the entire world opposed our application. The dozens of other countries who all voted for us found that we were well qualified to join the peaceful community of nations. These countries have all rethought Palestine just as you must do now. Rethink Palestine. Help us stop the illegal stealing of our land. Prime Minister. Where is he? Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Enough. Enough is enough. End the occupation. We ask that the international community stop hiding behind calls for resumption of talks without holding the Israeli government accountable for its stealing of our land. The international community has the responsibility to protect our people living under the terror of settlers, an occupying army, and a painful siege. We want the international community to defend us from the settlers and from the Israeli army. The attitude of the international community toward the Israeli government must be related to holding it directly accountable to international law and human rights. On behalf of the brave Palestinian people, in the tradition of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela, I still come here to deliver a message of peace and justice to Israel and the rest of the world. Security requires justice and an end of occupation. We cannot understand how the Israeli government can be misguided as to fail to understand that the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza that kills thousands of women and children only sows more hate. As the president of the Palestinian people, I remain totally committed to the vision of a two-state solution, so we can live in peace with our neighbor Israel. This is the reason I joined Pope Francis together with President Peres in our prayer for peace. Now I have told you about my world, the world of this old man, but you are young. In the language of youth, there is no such word as tired. All of you. In the vocabulary of youth, there is no such word as failure. In Maine, here in America, in Maine, every summer, young Palestinians, Israelis, Americans, Arabs, and others meet in a camp called Seeds of Peace. Seeds of Peace. Founded in 1993. They built the very world I am calling for in Palestine. It works. It's real. It's the future. To those who say peace between Israelis and Palestinians is impossible, I say, let them visit America. I say, let them visit Maine. In closing at 79, maybe 80 now, I do not know for certain if I will ever hold in my hand and taste the sweet fruit of peace. But I do know this for certain, I have held in my hand and seen with my own eyes the seeds of peace. The seeds of peace are the young Palestinian, Israelis, Americans, and others all over the world who form peace groups on college campuses like J Street and Students for Justice in Palestine. Those are the seeds of peace. And you are the seeds of peace. You are the seeds of peace. Don't underestimate the power of your youth. You can do a lot. It was the young people who marched in Birmingham, Alabama, with Martin Luther King, who caused race relations in America to be rethought. It was the young people in America whose protests on college campuses against the Vietnam War forced that war to be rethought. It was the young people in America whose protests on college campuses against apartheid caused that injustice to finally end. And I say this to you. You have the power to convince the American people to rethink Palestine. Wisdom may come from the old. Passion for justice is the province of the young. The old ask, what day will justice come? But for the young, the time for justice is always now. In the vocabulary of youth, the time for justice is always right now, and so it should be. It was to the young that Nelson Mandela a great friend of Palestine, once said that South Africa could never be fully free until Palestine was free. Nelson Mandela is waiting for us. Now, with each of you, seeds of peace, start tonight to build the world I prayed for with Pope Francis. Will you, seeds of peace, create the world of tomorrow where there will be no more Palestinians or Israelis killed? Will you, seeds of peace, create a world that supports the 99% of peace-loving Muslims, Jews and Christians, and reject violence, radical religion? Will you, seeds of peace, rethink Palestine and ask others to rethink it? Will you do that for the sake of Palestinians and Israelis? Of course, you will. Because here at this magnificent college, the Cooper Union, where magical things are created, as at colleges across America, religious and ethnic diversity already exists. You have already created in your universities a model of the very world of interreligious coexistence and peace and love that the old people try to tell you is impossible in my country. Don't believe them. Despite all Israeli attempts to make our nation accept a reality of exile and apartheid, under a cover of impunity, we continue our peaceful march towards freedom. Paraphrasing our late poet Mahmoud Darwish, you know Mahmoud Darwish, or you heard about it. Standing here, he said, staying here, permanent here in Palestine, eternal here, and we have one goal, one to be. And I say, yes, we will be. So, you already know how to build the road to future peace. And you know that it runs through Cooper Union. It runs through America. And yes, it runs right through Jerusalem and Palestine. We have all made mistakes. But today I say, let us move forward. Let us forgive, not 7 times, but as Jesus himself said, 70 times, 7 times. Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Today, I say the arc of fear is long, but it circles back to love. I intend to close that circle. And today, I humbly ask you, the magical students of Cooper Union, of America, and of the world, to be part of that change. Rethink Palestine. May God bless you. Thank you very much.